Welcome to Games Growth with Upptic, a podcast about the craft and business of scaling digital games. We speak with industry experts and investigate trends to highlight the strategies, technology, and tactical methodologies you can use to profitably grow your game to massive audiences. If you're interested in learning more about games growth, visit us at upptic.com. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Welcome back. As you can tell, we've renamed the podcast, so we're a Games Growth podcast now.
Games Growth?
Everything is different, and yet nothing is. Warren, you want to take us away with what's different, what's not?
Yeah, we got a new season. A lot has changed. We're really excited to try some new stuff this season. We've got a new upgraded recording setup. We've got some new software we're trying out. I'm coming to you live from my fancy new shed in my backyard with a fuzzy microphone. And we also wanted to include a few new faces. So you're going to probably be seeing a bit more of our Upptic team. Here at Upptic, we really, you hear from Xander and I a lot, but we're not really the people like working the magic. We have a lot of really awesome experts working on growth marketing and user acquisition, on creative, around Web3, around data science. And you're going to be seeing more of those faces and voices kind of mixed in. So we have two of our favorite experts from the team joining today. First off, we have Ava, our creative director, joining. Ava, welcome to the show for the first time.
Hey, Warren. Thank you. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. And then we have our senior growth manager, Ian, joining as well. Ian has a big background in traditional games growth, but also is focusing a lot on our Web3 and PC clients. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to have been invited back. So I hope that says something.
Yeah, I think our first repeat guest from inside the Upptic team.
Cool.
Xander, what are we doing today?
Yeah, good question. So we're a little late to the game in terms of prediction episode. Since this is our first episode back, we wanted to sort of set a foundation for where we sort of see the current state of the games industry and then what we expect to see over the 2023 in the coming year. So we'll just jump right into that and get going. This will be in sort of two parts. At the beginning, we'll do a quick review of the current state of the games industry, and then we'll go into a predictions and trends section. Our predictions and trends section will focus on different subsets, but user acquisition, creative, analytics, Web3 gaming, and then we'll do some wild speculation at the end. We'll do timestamps in the description, so if you are particularly interested in some of that and not the rest, you can jump ahead. Okay, well, without further ado, I will give a hopefully brief description of the current state of the games industry. We're going to start by zooming all the way out to where we are in the world and sort of zooming more and more into different aspects of the game industry as we go. So today is February 14th, 2023. And the first theme is macroeconomic conditions. So if we just sort of take this as a whole, overall job market is tight in the United States, but stocks are way down from their high. If you track this by stock performance, the S&P 500 is about 6%, down 6% from where it was a year ago. And the QQQ, which tracks the tech sector specifically, is down 12.5%. This proliferates down to top game and developers and publishers whose stocks are off significantly from their recent highs. And in many cases, we're seeing meaningful downtrends in their earnings as well. This has really affected many folks who work in the tech and gaming industry. We've seen significant turmoil and a lot of layoff in the preceding months. With one last note about macroeconomic factors is many forecasters are expecting a recession or nominal growth over the next year or two, which means we don't expect this to change meaningfully in the very short term. Theme 1. Theme 2, regulatory stance and regulatory policy. Western regulators, including the US, are taking a much more aggressive stance towards tech and gaming. A few examples of that are in the courts, the US and EU have both sued to prevent Microsoft from acquiring Activision Blizzard. We'll see how that plays out over the coming months. They're going into court this month. The DOJ has also filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google targeting the anti-competitive nature of its ad business. We've long on the podcast talked about how aggressive Google is with its aggressive ad business, and it's really interesting to see now that the courts are taking a similar stance. Lastly, the Department of Commerce released a report outlining the anti-competitive nature of Google and Apple's duopoly in mobile, and I expect to see more suits from the Department of Justice following that report in the coming weeks and months. Months, probably not weeks. And so if we think about the overall theme for this from a government perspective is the government regulators are emphasizing deconsolidation with the intention of increasing competition. And this is good. I mean, generally, this is what the government should be doing and really has been asleep at the wheel for the last, call it 10 years. All right, next big theme, crypto, one of our favorite topics here. Crypto assets are way down from their all-time high. Actually, strangely, both Bitcoin and Ethereum are 66% off their all-time high in 2021. The fever dream around Web3 game has, let's say, partially broken. Many people who were fair weather friends in the Web3 game space have sort of fled, and we're seeing a small but mighty cohort of folks who are continuing to invest there pretty aggressively. But no sooner has one big thing Most exciting topic has gone to the door. We have our new most exciting topic. Crypto is dead. Long live generative AI. ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, other generative AI programs have taken the world by storm. And we expect this to have a pretty meaningful impact on the future of the games industry. And we'll discuss more later. So that's all the table setting. We'll dig into each one independently. Let's start with user acquisition and growth. I guess we'll go to Warren first. Or Warren, Ian first. Do we have predictions about user acquisition and growth?
Ooh, that's some really good table setting, I think, for going into this year. And, we did a piece like at the end of last year to kind of cap it off that was kind of like our state of games growth for 2022. And it really feels like we're entering this year in like a fundamentally different industry in so many ways versus like where we started last year. And like this is going to have impacts high and low. And I think, we'll start this with, kind of the top of the funnel of like how players are being brought into these ecosystems. So, I mean, as a reminder, like in Upptic, we kind of think of kind of two groups of onboarding players right now. For some of these early stage Web3 games we work on, think about Web3 natives. But then for, traditional games audience, we're doing a lot of like traditional performance marketing, working with like Meta, Google, in-app networks like Unity, ironSource, AppLovin, et cetera, and DSPs, demand-side platforms. So we wanted to dig into this a little bit more. I think there's, a few interesting trends on social, like even though, Meta's earnings, got pummeled over the last year, it's still the leading channel. I mean, if people have $1 to spend, they're going to, in most cases, they should be spending it on Meta before they spend it anywhere else. That hasn't really changed, just the combination of addressable market plus robust algorithms for targeting and getting the desired the desired outcome. It's still pretty unparalleled. I mean, Google follows suit with the big caveat that like Google AdWords has not cracked how to work around iOS in a way that is really acceptable to the user acquisition community. So teams are still needing to kind of, I think, have their own data modeling layer to see results for Google from iOS. TikTok continues to be a powerhouse. Xander, I know you have a lot of opinions on the potential future of TikTok, but like that should still be top of priorities. As I'm sure we're going to touch on with Ava, like TikTok is really powered by the creatives that you feed it, and it needs pretty different tactics. And I think we'll get to that a little bit in our next section. And then the last one I want to call out for kind of most improved, again, like the earnings wouldn't tell you this, but Snapchat has really been kind of like our big rebound channel for the last year. I think it's forgotten for a lot of marketers. And it's just kind of a reminder of like the data on like which companies are generating the most in ad revenue or performing the best in the market is not correlated to where you're going to see the best media buying opportunities. And a lot of times user acquisition is about going where others aren't, and for us, a big part of that is strategic buying on iOS when CPMs are really low. And we'll get more into this as well. But I think Snap is another case of that, where it's just been deprioritized or written off by a lot of performance buyers, but it's really working for certain games that we work on. Ian, I know you have a background kind of working within the space. Maybe let's start with you here of digging a little bit more about like some of the trends that you expect to see in the user acquisition segment of the industry.
Sure thing. Yeah, I mean, just to sort of kick that off with some observations from 2022 before going into where it's going from here. I mean, two of the big ones from my perspective, at least, were, especially with some of our clients that we were getting more aggressive with growing their games. We were getting more diverse with their channel portfolio, and DSPs ended up coming into the mix. At a cursory glance, a lot of them were performing really well. And through some painful learning process, we had discovered that, a good portion of that traffic ended up being web publishers that were sort of sketchily taking advantage for organic installs via methodology that didn't have it get flagged in the same way that previous fraudulent publishers would get flagged. So, I mean, that was a big painful learning and experience from 2022. I mean, that's not to write off DSPs as a inventory source overall, but just sort of tread carefully, in my opinion. And we got pretty smart about ways to identify that sort of borderline fraud without having the glaring red flags come out of it. And then, I also have been very involved on the SDK ad network side of things, Unity, AppLovin, ironSource, et cetera. And while it has been a thing for a while that one of those SDK ad networks could ingest both in-app purchase revenue data for optimization and potentially ad monetization data for the overall return on ad spend picture. Typically, it was siloed to that same network. So if I am using ironSource mediation, I can run user acquisition on ironSource and use that ad monetization as a basis for their campaigns to automatically optimize towards results. But now we're starting to see these networks, specifically Unity was a huge one that implemented this in 2022, and campaigns for the clients that were running that, their game is heavily monetized through ads as well. We saw huge success by them pulling in this third-party data and then being able to optimize to theoretically the user level, but most notably like the publisher and country level based on the ad monetization revenue that they were ingesting.
Makes a lot of sense. So if we're saying there's a high-level takeaway, it seems like the first and foremost, social is still a place to go. We still have to be careful with DSP. There's obviously some you can incredibly drive a lot of revenue on the long tail there, but it's basically not your first place to go. The SDK portfolio technology is improving, which is allowing them to be more competitive. So if we were, is it fair? Go ahead, Warren.
No, I think that's all correct. I would add one other kind of like bullet point period on the end of this, which is like, it's actually a pretty darn good time to be doing user acquisition because of all of the fear and the lack of competition in the market. So that's also kind of counterintuitive to the narrative that we hear in gaming and tech, which is like everything's on fire right now. If you have a viable growth strategy, it's actually a really good time to be buying right now, we're seeing.
Awesome.
Just to quickly piggyback on that, I think that's part of the reason why you could attribute some success to these SDK ad networks too. I would estimate 99% or, maybe a little bit less, but of their spend comes from games running user acquisition. So where Facebook, you're still going to be running up against brand advertisers and other types of advertisers. That's not the case on SDK ad networks. So if you have a profitable buying strategy, it's a super viable place to go.
Makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, let's sort of expand the conversation to include the creative that we're seeing successful on the different channels. Ava, do you want to talk to us a bit about what you're seeing perform well right now and what you think that's going to extrapolate out to as the year goes on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely depends by channel and by client and genre. So we definitely have a pretty wide testing as part of our strategy and find different kinds of creative performing well on different channels. We used to see like on TikTok, just live action, a lot of the automated VO trends working really well just on that network or on Snap. But now we're seeing that work really well on other channels, especially Meta and Reels. So we see kind of a blending of a lot of trends there. And we also see that we're cycling through trends a lot faster, especially TikTok is a very hungry machine for creative. So we find that there's higher rewards there, but higher creative fatigue and churn. So definitely higher output. And we're seeing just the rise of user-generated content across all channels expand and explode. So that's something that we definitely encourage testing on all channels and across all genres. And just seeing a lot of more raw, authentic user-generated content coming to the surface. I think you have a few seconds to snag people as they're scrolling. If they sense that it's an ad, they pass really quickly. So it's just a matter of catching people in those first few seconds, engaging them. And we're definitely still seeing that people are still willing to watch ads. Good polished content is still performing really well. Our clients that do invest in like 3D and cinematics that content's working really well. So we're kind of seeing a split that people either want really raw user-generated content that seems really natural and authentic, or they're willing to watch the ad, but they want it to be really polished and well done.
Yeah, I would just add there that I think a lot of what's worked for Ava and her team's approach is really casting a broad net. Like we really pride our team on like having a pretty diverse set of skill sets in the creative background. And we'll find for some of the games we work on, it'll be entirely creator style content, UGC style content that's really taking it away and like driving the portfolio. Other times just like showing the game in a compelling way. Other times it's animation. But I think the important thing is as we get more dependency on the algorithms of these network to make decisions for us, what you feed those algorithms, which is ultimately creative first and foremost, becomes more and more important into finding like profitable lanes. And so the other important aspect of having like a diverse creative portfolio is like feeding these algorithms to find different pockets of players that have different preferences and react to different things.
Yeah, it makes sense. Creative is more important. That's an interesting call out that as TikTok-like formats proliferate through other channels, obviously the TikTok creative type that works so well on that channel is going to start working elsewhere. And and we're seeing that everywhere. Like Reels is the example you called out. YouTube Shorts is another thing that is basically copying TikTok. So it seems like a very clear and obvious reason for that to be happening, but it's just an interesting trend.
Which is interesting because it goes completely against the other big narrative, which is like AI generated creative, which is like, it's like these two extremes we're seeing in trends of just completely AI driven, which I don't think has proven itself out from a performance standpoint, but I think ultimately we will see some lanes where that's very fruitful. And then like very human, very natural feeling content being the format whose time has come.
There's the interesting hybrid, though, of, it's the user-generated content with the AI voice that is so popular on TikTok and everywhere else.
Yeah, we're seeing some interesting visuals too, kind of playing into augmented reality. I've seen a lot of really creative, whimsical typographic compositions that people are getting really creative using that more as a design element. So I think you're seeing this a split where you're getting really whimsical, dreamlike, mythology kind of inspired images that is really popular in AI art, but then you're also getting really bad lighting on UGC style creatives, people with their, shot with their iPhone. So it's a super interesting mix. And what we're seeing kind of fall away is the middle ground that was working really well a few years ago, which is more kind of standard end cards, CTAs, like, just screams ad right away, mid-level of polish, like the middle class of ads is falling away, I guess, to either extreme.
The stereotypical mobile ad.
It's just like real life. Don't listen to me. The thing that call there is pretty interesting, though, the death of end cards. That's like a pretty interesting trend because for the longest arc of mobile games history, it's always been like you have to have an end card. That is like the thing to do. And it's interesting to see that that's a piece that's now more case by case and not just like an absolute, you have to do it every time.
Well, and we're trained now, right? I mean, like everyone's used to, if you see a game on, whatever platform you're on, if you're on PC, if you're on mobile, that, you click the button and it's going to take you to be able to download that. And yeah, to be clear, we're specifically speaking, I think, more to like the end cards within video content. It's like you don't need to, like, old school is like, make sure to show the Android and iPhone so people know that they can go to the Android and iPhone, the Play an app store. But like everyone knows that, we're trained, it's implied. So like you can just focus more on the core content in the ad. You don't need the kind of logistics at the end.
Yeah, I think it's really good just to not make any assumptions and keep testing and just being willing to reinvent and look at what's out there in terms of trends, but also be willing to totally abandon that, come up with really innovative, creative, unique content and try that out. I think it's a really important part of our testing strategy.
One other trend I want to call out on the creative side that's really evolved for us over the last few months is just thinking about the role of creative a little more full funnel. And this has been really magnified for some of the Web3 games that we work on that have very complex ecosystems. A lot of times the problem is not generating interest, it's explaining what the hell is going on, because you can have these very complex economies and gameplay systems where there's like multiple things you can own and they interact with the game and the economy in different ways. So we've actually started biasing more of our team's time to sort of this deeper funnel content of like, okay, you're already interested, you're in the game ecosystem, but how do you get started? How do you understand, how this game piece or this digital collectible works, how the economy works? And we found that to be very fruitful in just like driving active, engaged, both community members when it's pre-product and also training for the right kind of behavior and taking a player on the journey to show them kind of this what's available to them in these greater, I hesitate to use the word metaverses, but basically these tagline we use for one of our partners is more than a game, because the idea that the game exists outside of the core loop of, click a button, do a thing, that there's more going on. So you have to educate more. You can't just click here, download, play, have fun. There's more to these ecosystems than that.
Right. And we'll do a deep dive on that as we get to the Web3 and crypto segment in fairly short order. Okay, so expanding out from the creative that's working on the channels, let's talk a little bit about our analytics function, how we think about how to measure and optimal performance of these games. And one of the things that I've really noticed, and I think everyone expects to be a really, really critical thing to watch and understand how to model around going forward, is privacy and privacy changes as they continue to be in flux over the next several years, but likely for years and years to come. People who are able to people in technology companies who are able to effectively adapt to privacy and understanding how to model in a privacy-centric environment are going to be the ones who dominate UA on both mobile, PC, and Web3 going forward. That's my hypothesis here. And if we think about sort of the people who have been the first mover here, Apple with SKAN, SKAN network, they've provided a very major hurdle for their marketers to overcome. And they've done a little bit better. They implemented SKAN 4.0, which in theory is a better framework. It's not been widely adopted by the ecosystem yet. We expect that to be widely adopted and have more granularity in the measurement from SKAN going forward. But in the short term, people who are able to use the signals they get from scan and combine it with the signals they're able to get from deterministic or probabilistic data on an MMP side, those are the folks who are going to be able to really get a comprehensive understanding of their user acquisition campaigns and then be able to scale their campaigns with confidence. And that's something that I think we all agree is, and everything we talked about in terms of there being less competition, that means the people who are really able to take advantage of of that understanding are going to be the ones who are positioned to really win for the next year or two. There's another thing to throw in here, which is that Google's privacy sandbox is slated for their first API to come out in, according to their website, early 2023. That's now, as far as I can tell. So I think we really also have to expect that there may be a major complication coming on the Google side, an unknown level of complication at an unknown time in the future. And so we're going to have to be really agile with adapting to that. Any other thoughts in terms of what we expect from the analytics side?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. Where to start? I mean, first and foremost, don't expect, we saw this. This is now excruciatingly clear with iOS. I think we can expect something similar, but maybe not as bad with Google. Like, the platforms are not going to solve your problems for you. They are not approaching things from a buyer side. Like, we are going to be at, our team at Upptic, anyone who's at a game developer or game publisher, like, you're going to need to figure it out for yourself or, with partners that are working on that same thing. And like, honestly, when, we've talked about this on the podcast in past seasons, like when the iOS privacy restrictions hit, it punched us in the gut just like anyone else buying in the ecosystem. And we basically had to like adapt or die. We came out of that after months of beating our head against the wall with a really effective system for buying on iOS that, candidly, I'm not sure if we would be in business right now if we hadn't figured that out. But that's for the near term. That's been like the number one reason that teams have been coming to us, and like the breakthroughs we've been having is just like cracking iOS open, because it's still so painful. Like, I think there was a narrative the last couple of years of, every month there'd be like multiple pieces of content or webinars about like how this team solved iOS using scan. It was all a lie. Like, most teams like just failed miserably and repeatedly, and it's no slight to them. It's just most teams are not provided with like the resources needed to solve something like this, and Apple has done a horrible job of providing us the tools themselves. So point being, it's going to continue to be a pain in the ass, and there's going to continue to be like outsized returns for any team that can work in spite of the obstacles that Apple and maybe soon Google are putting in front of us for using data to optimize our growth marketing in light of these privacy changes.
Yeah, agreed. Another place we've really been expanding into is PC. And I'm curious if you or someone else on the team wants to talk about what they expect from the PC performance marketing going forward.
Yeah, I'll start here, and I'd love, Ian, for you to chime in as well. That's probably been the biggest new portion of our business. I'd say, during the Web3 boom, we had a lot of growth and uptick around Web3, and we're still very bullish in that segment. There's just less new businesses as the bubble has popped, but, I think the real deal will emerge. But what we're seeing as the market gets tighter, funding dries up, is that a lot of PC gaming companies are becoming more cross-platform. They're bringing in more talent from mobile. Performance marketing as a segment is so mature in gaming now that a lot of PC companies are starting to say like, hey, what if we took some of that performance marketing strategy that worked on mobile, and instead of just doing like blind brand spend, buying for impressions, that we actually try to use performance strategies on PC. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot of the more forward thinking teams do, is like, hey, how can we crack open performance marketing for PC? We've done, we've launched games for X amount of years and not really looked any deeper than impressions and clicks. How can we start looking at return on ad spend and deeper funnel metrics? And the tech has matured too. Like, there's providers like GameSight that have really started to open up ability to do performance marketing for PC. So I think that's going to be a huge trend in the PC segment, is like, you'll see this big bifurcation of people that are still doing, sorry for the language, but like dumb brand spend, basically meaning that you're not measuring anything in depth. There's smart brand spend as well. That versus people that are like really focusing and looking at the data behind all their buys and optimizing for what's bringing better returns in that ecosystem. Ian, I know you've been deep in the weeds with a lot of our PC and cross-platform games. What are some of your predictions around how, the PC games landscape is going to be shaping up?
Oh, man. Yes, I can barely keep my eyes above the weeds. I'm so deep in them. But yeah, just to quickly speak to GameSight, for those that aren't familiar on both sides, I would say GameSight, it's the same as what AppsFlyer is to mobile measurement, right? It's the industry standard. They have great tech stack. And, it's so interesting because they built out this tech stack to support desktop games that had a $60 price tag, right? They had designed all of this attribution and reporting to be, we can track when someone clicks the ad, we can track when someone opens the game, and, associate that back to the channel it came from. Like, that's the whole core of what measurement, mobile or desktop measurement is. But what they don't have is this whole mindset from mobile is, we're driving installs, and then we want to be able to track on a cohorted basis how much revenue or engagement they're driving after X number of days. And then you set your buying target based on that, and then you know what channels are profitable or not. So this was very long-winded, but Gainsight itself doesn't have built-in revenue cohorted reporting. So it just speaks to the infancy of the industry, right? It's like, so now you have these cross-platform games that are trying to build mobile and desktop, and they're not going to have a $60 price tag. They're going to be free to download, free to play, and then they're going to monetize through other mechanics. So being able to track the users that go across platforms, and, before anyone freaks out about the, app tracking transparency considerations here, for the most part, if we're tracking them across devices, they're going to have some sort of login mechanism, and then that's the joining factor. But even being able to join on that data and then deduplicate the data from what you see on mobile versus what you see on desktop versus Android is super important. And yeah, so it's been a ton of work setting this up for some of our more forward-thinking clients, but we're, now running actual performance marketing for free-to-play desktop games, which is relatively new.
I'd love to come back to Ava a little bit here too. Ava, I know over the last year, your team has started working on more in the PC space and Web3, and also in like some bigger brands that are maybe coming into performance marketing for the first time. So how do you see creative for this sector of the PC games that are coming from more of like a big brand background, more like make that AAA trailer, trying to dip a toe into the more performance marketing ecosystem? How do you see that adaptation going?
It's an interesting one because I think with larger brands and more popular IP go through a lot more regulations, restrictions on the content that can be shown. And what works the best for UGC is definitely unscripted, kind of off the cuff, natural reactions. Humor plays a big part in that. So it's very hard to script that and very hard to run by the client ahead of time. As much as possible, we ask for like a sense of trust and willingness to experiment and try when we create creatives to kind of have more natural content, but then also have a backup plan in place that we can use in case it's pushing the boundaries a little bit too far. But definitely, we encourage it to experiment there if possible. Works with the brand guidelines.
Yeah, I've seen you have to deal with that for sure. Like there's a big tension when companies are used to like approval of every word that's said in an ad, every frame, versus like what's actually going to drive performance and hit their business KPIs is something that feels a lot more natural and in line with like the trends of what people actually respond to. So that's a battle that like a lot of larger companies are going to face, I think.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of concern over the face behind the video if they're marketing and promoting other objects, video content, if it's aligned with the values of the company. So there's a lot of concern about vetting talent in advance, getting them approved for bigger IPs as well. And we find that experience doesn't necessarily yield better results. We find that a lot of people with very little experience as actors, just as long as they can talk about it authentically and it's a product that they're excited about, that yields really good results for us, much more so than having a lot of followers and bigger presence on TikTok.
Interesting. Makes sense. Okay, well, let's take this and pivot it to sort of the other side where, we're working in a world on PC and mobile where we're seeing a trend towards increased privacy, less available granular data, and having to do combat and modeling that, to another side of the games industry, which is Web3 and the juxtaposition with the transparency of the blockchain. So Ian or Warren, do you want to take it away with sort of how that's playing out from an analytics perspective, but then like broadening it out into what we see in sort of the more macro trends on Web3 gaming and the state of Web3 games going forward?
I'll defer to you, Warren, for now.
Yeah, sure. I can start here. I mean, okay, there's a lot to dig into here. I think the point I'll start is sort of like, where are these games right now? So yeah, I'd say the last 24 months were the bubble of funding and money pouring into Web3. And now there's been like who made it to the other side? Like who actually came out of that with a functional product? Like we're not in that bubble anymore. People are not throwing bags of cash at anything with blockchain involved in some way. So the state of the market right now, what I'm seeing is the best in class teams have proof of concept. They have a game in beta. And now it's like, crap. Okay, now how do we get actual players in here? Because one thing that's undeniably true is the Web3 sector has shrank from that bubble period. So if you just look at like, daily active wallets, from peak periods, depending on when you sample, it's down like 90% or more, depending on the metric that you're looking at. So I think there was a lot of these teams that were born of Web3 that assumed that like the mania would only continue to grow and that like it would have its own natural momentum. The players would just show up. This is the exact opposite. Like their core community has like abandoned in large capacity. But that doesn't change like at least our core thesis that Web3 allows you to make better games, more intriguing gameplay pieces, better economies. So I think the more forward-thinking teams understand that And they're not saying like, hey, here's a crypto game or a GameFi product. They're saying, cool, we made a game. We made a fun mobile game, a fun PC game. It's got some Web3, call it like spiciness to it. I heard that term from someone and I really like it. But, we need 20,000 users for a soft launch. We need to build a go-to-market plan to bring 10 million players into here. And no one's done that yet. So point being, the more mature products, I think, are now starting to say, how can we fold in a traditional growth marketing playbook and best practices to not be a crypto game, but to just be like a successful mass market game with our unique sauce that comes from like the way that we integrate Web3 technologies. So that's what I see, in the kind of the upper bounds of the market, the more forward-thinking teams. And then there's just obviously just death all over the place. Like so many of these companies are just massive layoffs. They're already gone. They're not coming back. Like a lot of the traditional gaming companies that jumped in headfirst to Web3 gaming have ran away just as quickly before they even shipped one product, have already like shut down those decisions and initiatives. And they're just following the trends of like money's pouring in, go after this. Okay, the money's left, back out, shut it down. So those are some of the macro trends that I've been seeing.
Yeah, makes sense. Ian, do you have any more color here?
Yeah. So speaking of the, for the bubble, 2021 through first half of 2022, that's when a lot of these studios got big money. Definitely a lot of them have already folded before they even got to market. But I would expect, especially in the second half of this year, some of these first, Web3 focused, like not just slapping Web3 onto a game, but like designing the whole ecosystem with a Web3 value proposition in mind, and AAA quality games will come to market in the second half of this year. And that's going to be super interesting just to see what happens in terms of, it's not like a cash grab, play to earn, and that's why you should join this game. It's like, here's an actually fun game, and here's how Web3 and blockchain empowers our community to do more fun stuff and cool stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see, as Warren alluded to, the number of active wallets is significantly down. So when you have that kind of value proposition, what's the opportunity to convert standard Web 2 gamers? And that's sort of a nice segue into one of my other takeaways from 2022 was, I was pretty convinced that people could clearly see the value of, I'm buying a thing in the game. I would like to own that thing so I could sell it to other people or do what I want with it. That value proposition has not been, bought into by the masses yet. And it is still very popular to hate NFTs. Just people hear that word and knee-jerk reaction is, I hate it. I don't like it. It's dumb. It's a scam. But I think, 2022, Reddit was amazing case study in don't focus on it being a blockchain thing. Focus on it being a value proposition thing. And so they released their PFP collection, which are all unique Reddit style avatars that their users could buy, and they are NFTs. However, at no point during their marketing or the on-ramp to the users did they describe them as NFTs. They say these are digital collectibles that you can own and do what you want with it, and they're unique and they're super cool. And people are like, wow, that's awesome. I'm going to do that. And, Warren turned me on to one of the channels that he's active in on the side where people literally are just hating on NFTs, and they have a Discord avatar as their PFP, right? Their profile.
Or Reddit avatars, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I said Discord. I meant Reddit. Thank you. So those very same people that hate NFTs have an NFT as their Reddit avatar. So I think that's a great example of don't focus on it being great because it's blockchain. Focus on its value, which is it's a digital thing you own, and then you can get people to convert. And the fiat on-ramp is also huge.
Well, crypto has a reputation problem, right? And deservedly so in many respects. The analogy I would make is it's kind of like when there's band that you can admit and acknowledge is a good band, but their fans are so annoying that you also hate the band because you hate what they're associated with. And that's sort of the problem that Web3 and crypto have in the current gamer community. Like if you separate it all out from the core functionality that it brings, it's net additive to game design and experience. But it's got such a reputational problem, to Ian's point, that it's just making everything harder to digest for the game. So I think as we see more compelling implementations of this, begrudgingly gamers will acknowledge that, like, yes, this does make things more fun.
I think that's true. I think everything you guys said is correct. There's actually another really, really major problem, which I think is at least as important to why Web3 games didn't take off over the time that we had sort of hoped in the last year. And that's because the user experience is terrible.
Yes.
I don't know how else to describe it. It's fucking terrible. I'm a really hardcore gamer. I'm pretty tech savvy. I've played basically every game that you could possibly imagine. And I've tried to play a lot of Web3 games, and it is so high friction that I like just basically don't do much of it at all anymore. And that is like, if you can't get me, I'm like, I'll throw money at games that I think are all engaging. And I think that's actually at least as big of much of a problem as the perception is the fact that like it's just really, really hard to get someone to take money from someone if they're trying to buy your game. And that's just outside the fact that the games don't really exist yet. Mostly, I mean, there's a few of them, but like the vast majority of these don't exist yet. And I think one really way we can antithesis this is we saw the biggest advertisement for a Web3 game ever on the Super Bowl last Sunday. It was a Digidaidaku ad, which is an NFT mint for a game which is coming, right? It's like doesn't exist yet. And it was basically a copy of the Coinbase ad where you had to scan this thing right now and you can sign up scan this QR code right now and there'll be some core value prop. If you scan the core value prop from the Digidaidaku ad, you got sent to someone's Twitter page, the CEO of this games company. That is like the most absurd performance marketing campaign on games I've ever seen.
I can give a little more nuance there. So everyone's trying to,
Sure.
we're coming, 2 days after the Super Bowl. So everyone's trying to unpack this limit break Digidaidaku Super Bowl ad debacle. So yeah, the rumor is that it was a $6.5 million ad buy for the 30-second spot. And yeah, the main outcome of it was Gabe, the founder, got about 1 million impressions of the tweet and about 50,000 retweets, which if you back that out to a CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, it's like $6,000 per 1,000 impressions. I'm doing the math poorly in my head, but it was bad. But two things. One is like, that was not I think something went wrong in the process because the goal was to drive to like a minting site. But
like, that's the point.
But yeah. So I'm saying something went wrong in the process. And this was kind of the fallback was to go to his Twitter page is my understanding. So we're still trying to get to the truth of this. I don't want to knock him for experimenting. I think we need experimentation in marketing to drive the space forward. So I do appreciate the effort here, but also I don't know that this is the particular topic to clone and repeat based on the data that we see around it, So props to them for pushing the medium, but it was a pretty janky experience for anyone who actually tried to participate in it.
And I think that's sort of the point. It's like we don't have the like click IAP button, pay $30 for
right.
an in-game.
You had to already have a wallet set up to go to the minting page, and then it was like the first X thousand people to go there. So it was arguably, some people said it leaked ahead of time and it was fully minted out before the ad even shown. So that didn't work as intended.
That's the point I'm making. That's the sort of crux of this is the infrastructure to onboard players does not exist, and it won't exist for a while. Until it exists, it doesn't matter what the sentiment is. There's just not going to be a player base until you can get people on easily.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where the whole notion of, custodial wallets is going to be becoming more and more popular. Basically, you onboard someone free to play and potentially even have them earn NFTs within a game or earn coins within a game, and don't have them set up, get the seed phrase for the wallet and set it up, blah, blah, blah. Basically hold that on the user's behalf and let them accumulate things. And then when they want to cash out, give them the opportunity to do so. There are some security considerations there. Like if you're actually, holding that custodial wallet, like the potential for getting hacked for those wallets is higher because the user doesn't actually have the original credentials. But either way, I mean, I think that's how you could really minimize that friction. And I think that'll be getting more and more popular as we see Web3 games pivoting to mobile.
Yeah, it makes sense. Ava, I wanted to go to you for your take here. What are you seeing from a creative perspective you're working very closely with a lot of Web3 games. How are you seeing, from a creative perspective, what is going on in the Web3 gaming space?
Yeah, I think as Warren alluded to earlier, explainer videos are definitely something that we're doing more of, more longer form content that's community focused to deliver more value there. Longer form content and community content gives a deeper dive. It's a chance for developers to be more authentic and kind of friendly and casual with their audience. So I think that's something that people respond to a lot, is that authenticity and also availability of the creators for their community. So I think it's a mix. It's definitely just the shiny visuals is not going to be enough to pull people into the games. We have to deliver value, meaning, purpose. We see a lot of community messaging around being part of the community, and just the value there is, I think, what people are attracted to and looking to be a part of. So that's a big part of our messaging. Is
there any other predictions we have on the Web3 space or anything else you missed before we move into the crazy zone?
I want to get to these wild predictions.
Great. All right. So we're now, if we say everything up to this point was, I don't get to give a statistic, a reasonably high probability outcome, we're going to move into our low, but lower probability outcomes. We think that it's worth talking about regardless. And so wild speculation predictions. I'll go first. This is something that if you listen to the podcast before, you've heard and you're probably sick of hearing about. And I would say that this is as much a plea for rationality as it is as a prediction. So my prediction is that the U.S. government Apple and or Google or some public-private hybrid makes a substantial effort to curb the reach of TikTok in the next year. I think if we sort of think fundamentally about what TikTok is, it is basically a weapon of mass mind manipulation that is one way or another controlled by the United States' largest geostrategic rival in the world. And so what that means is, in some capacity, if you care about Western democracy, you have to look at TikTok skeptically. And my hope is that somewhere, someone at some point of the chain of command takes a very serious look at this and says, at a minimum, let's divest this from the Chinese company and make it a publicly traded U.S. company so we can regulate it. At a maximum, you maybe ban it. I'm not sure. But we got to do something about TikTok. And if we don't, I really think we're sleepwalking our way into mass mind manipulation. That's my hottest take.
Yeah, my tinfoil hat is not quite as on point as yours for TikTok, Xander. I know we disagreed slightly there. I think I'm still the thing that TikTok has going for it is such a phenomenal user experience, and then also just like such an effective acquisition channel that I hope that like kind of the worst case scenarios for how we think TikTok might be tied to foreign governments will not be proven out. But I think I'm just waiting to see where the truth lies, because it's really great to work in TikTok.
It is. Well, and that's the thing. The product is really good, but I think if you're actually there's literally a CCP person on the board of ByteDance who then owns TikTok. So I mean, if you don't acknowledge that, you're just not being honest. So anyway, that's enough of my TikTok.
I would say, what I would say is my incentives are not aligned to, it's like you have to follow the incentives. So it's like as strong as TikTok is for a channel for the core work we do, it's like I'm just really hoping that the worst case scenarios don't pan out.
Fair enough. Who's next? Ian, do you want to go next?
So being deep in Web3 gaming and being deep in discussions with both Google and Apple about what is the path forward to sanctioned approval on their app stores. There's been lots of companies skirting sketchily behind the scenes to get their app approved. And then, or you can take someone like Axie Infinity that has been at the table with Google and Apple, and the path forward has been very slow and very painful. The biggest thing that I noticed from those conversations is, originally both of them saying, well, if someone buys an NFT, we want 30% of it. Us sort of taking a step back and saying, well, that really doesn't make any sense because it's a player to player sale. And at best, the publisher is going to get, maybe a marketplace fee, which would be about 2%, or a creator fee, which could be anywhere from 0 to up to 10% in some cases. But that 30% would have to come out of that, right? That's the only revenue that the publisher or developer is seeing from those player-to-player sales. So my bold prediction is Apple and or Google gets wise to that within 2023 and levies their 30% against those creator and or marketplace fees. Mic drop.
I think you're right, but I think your time horizon is off. I think you're overestimating the speed at which the platforms move, but inevitably, if they want to capture that market segment while still having it viable on their platforms, I think that is the inevitable end state.
Yeah, good one. Awesome. Ava, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think for 2023, I'm very bullish on AI. We have already started using it internally for copy, and it's not there for image creation yet for final assets, but it's getting closer and closer. And so I think as we continue to see future iterations of GPT chat rolling out, it's going to be something that we can take from ideation, getting a lot of really creative ideas quickly, testing things out in rough stages before we move to production, using it for VO, using it for image manipulation, and even video editing. So I think that we'll be seeing that more and more, just start to completion, full ad campaign, having AI every step of the way. Not saying it's going to be good. I'm expecting a lot of really awkward, cringy fails along the way, which I'm personally stoked to watch.
I'm here for it.
So I'm grabbing my popcorn for that. Yeah.
How long until we have the full cycle, either at Google or Meta, someone says, okay, we AAA, but with no creative. You click a button, you give us a budget, and we just do the entire thing.
I don't think we're going to be having that for a while, but I think we're going to have so many companies fundraising off that vision this year.
Makes sense. Good one, Ava. Maureen, how about you?
Yeah, so here's my wildly speculative prediction. I'll just read it off. Fundraising conditions, privacy limitations, and measurement, and need to cut all non-essential spend for gaming companies will simultaneously create gaming's worst year of growth in the last decade, while facilitating generational opportunities for profitable UA growth. AKA, we will look back on this era of user acquisition as the equivalent of buying homes into the depth of the great housing crisis. So again, it's pretty counterintuitive, but I think all of the forces that Xander talked about up top have really created a huge opportunity for anyone that A, has a good product, and B, has a competent, growth marketing team and the tools to measure it with. It's honestly we try not to chill Upptic too much directly in this, but like we've seen for some of our legacy games that we were working on for multiple years, that they're having better opportunities for profitable scaling than they have at any point in their history. It's an amazing market, and it's counterintuitive because all the executives are looking at the state of the market. Funding's getting cut. People are being told to cut your marketing budget, cut your creative budget, only stick to the essentials. But sometimes you have to zig when everyone else is zagging. And like if no one's buying in the market and you have a good product, it's really good ROI to be scaling for if you can, take those calculated risks right now.
Yeah, very unintuitive, but it makes a lot of sense. And I guess that's good for Upptic because, we're the ones operating that. Awesome. Well, Ava, Ian, Warren, thank you all so much for coming and joining us for the inaugural episode of the Games Growth Podcast. We'll hope to have you back soon. I hope this was helpful for everyone. Warren, you want to take us off, sign us off?
Yeah. Ava, Ian, thank you for kicking off the new season with us. This was so much more fun to have you guys on here. Sorry, Xander. But no, as always, we just talked a little bit about what Upptic does, so I won't beat it over the head. But yeah, we really work with game developers to do all things to help them grow profitably. And in spite of all this, we're quite optimistic on the opportunity for gaming in 2023. So if you need help with any of the stuff that we talked about today, we love talking to teams building exciting games. And just reach out to us on the website. It's upptic.com. That's upptic.com.
Talk soon.